Three in the Box is not affiliated with USPSA or its board of directors. Bill, Josh, and Nikki make this podcast. Our views are our own, and the views expressed by our guests are their own. Nothing said on this podcast is intended to represent the views of any organization unless expressly stated.
This is a Facade podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Three in the Box podcast, powered by Power Soccer Shop. I'm Bill.
I'm Josh.
I'm Nikki, and this is Three in the Box.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Three in the Box, powered by Power Soccer Shop. I am Bill Schultz, here with the usual gang, Josh Berger and Nikki Dwyer. Josh, Nikki, how we doing?
Doing fantastic.
Thanks, Nikki. Thanks for that, enthusiastic submission to the podcast. It's another week in United States Power Soccer Association, and last week was a bit of a doozy, you guys.
Yeah, it was. A
little bit going on in the world of U.S. Power Soccer right now. We, as a podcast, had our biggest 24-hour period in terms of viewership ever. Mm-hmm. We had our biggest week in terms of viewership ever. And we had, as Josh reminded me, more comments than we've ever had on an episode or video that we've done before. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that was us so much as what's going on in the world of power soccer.
Yeah, I mean, like I said in the last episode, people are definitely coming up to myself and Nikki at a local tournament that we had literally the same weekend that the proposal was announced. And people are asking for my opinion. People are asking for Nikki's opinion. Like, what do you guys think? Like, I don't know. I'm kind of leaning this way, kind of leaning that way. But, stick with us and check out the episode that we're going to drop the following week. So maybe that's why people are just curious. It's a monumental change if this goes through. And so people want to make sure that they have all the information they have before making the decision at the AGM meeting in June.
That's true. A lot of people have questions. A lot of people have concerns.
Mm-hmm. And we tried last week, and I think most of you, it seems like, tuned in to our episode last week. Last week, we tried really hard to give sort of a very high-level overview of what's going on, right? And sort of the main points of the proposal as we understand it. Hopefully the vast majority of you got a chance to go to these town halls. I went to all of them. Josh and Nikki were in at least one of them each. Mm-hmm. There's just still a lot of questions, right? And I think even tonight, like before we started filming the episode, Josh and Nikki, we were asking each other questions about like, oh, do you understand this part? Or did you hear anything about that part at the town hall that you went to? Because I think the number one thing I can say about it as we sort of like move into week 2 of these discussions post town hall is like, it's kind of complicated. Mm-hmm. Like whether it be terminology, whether it be like just the overall structure of like, George is drawing these pictures of like team 2 plays 2 and 3 plays. I mean, it's certainly more complicated than what we have now.
It's a lot of moving parts, that's for sure. It's not so cookie cutter like it has been for the last decade. Everybody knows exactly what's needed, and that's that. Now we got this where it's like Ascent, Apex, classification, qualification, open tournaments, Super Regional Classic, National 2014. There's a lot of moving parts. And so we're hoping that we can clarify that even more for you guys.
And I think I don't think I'm the only one, but it certainly applies. Like, I think the Apex Ascent thing is a little confusing. Like, yes, people will get used to it, but like those words are very close to each other. And it may be like the right move just to maybe change the terminology slightly so that we can keep track.
Yeah. I mean, premier level and, what's the other word? I mean,
I don't know. And I don't want to, again, like people worked hard on this and they did a good job, but I also like now's the time to tweak it, right? And I think that's one thing that really makes sense to tweak. Like nobody really, I'm still correcting people on Ascent and Apex, and I'm still making mistakes myself on it.
Yeah.
Weekend.
I mean, we're still in a very early phase of this whole thing. So, I mean, I'm sure that USPSA is very open to wanting to change certain things based on what the feedback that they're getting from everybody.
All I know is Apex is a video game, and like Ryan said last week, a scent is a fragrance.
Got it. Nailed it.
I forgot about the Ascent part, but every time I hear Apex, I think of that as well, and I'm like, I'm not okay with it.
Yeah, maybe before we get too far into this, though, I want to just kind of lay out for folks what we're doing tonight. And Josh, Nikki, and I are going to have a conversation. Last week we gave you like the flyover, right? Like a kind of, for me, like kind of a happy-go-lucky, like we gave the like flower review of this last week, right? We gave like the details in a neutral, slightly leaning positive way. Tonight, we're going to get into our concerns. Tonight, we're going to talk about the things that we have questions on, that you have asked us questions about, and what we don't necessarily like about this. Then I'm going to kick Josh and Nikki out of here, and I'm going to have a conversation with George. Just me and George. We're going to go straight to the source. I'm going to ask him some of the questions that we have, some of the questions that y'all have asked, some of the questions that I heard in the town halls that I don't feel like were answered to the extent that I want to hear answers to them. So I'm excited about that conversation. Hopefully George and the rest of y'all don't hate me after it, because I think I'm probably going to give him a hard time a little bit. But, we got to know what this is actually going to be before we vote for it and decide to implement it in the league. So,
yeah.
Let's get into it.
I think that's great. I mean, hopefully we clarify everything. I mean, we're not going to be able to clarify every single question, but at least hopefully Bill and George can get the knowledge that you guys need out there to make a responsible decision.
Yeah. So I think we kind of hit on the first thing already, and that is just like it's a little bit complicated. Certainly as we learn into anything like this, like any change in anything that we're all used to, there's going to be growing pains, and we're going to need, have trouble understanding it, learning it. It takes time to do that. But I just think some of this is complicated. And one of the things we talked about before we started filming was the regional classic versus the opens, right? You guys actually, which one of you asked me this? An open, as I understand it, and we'll ask George to clarify this, but an open tournament, as I understand it, is basically anything regional that's not, excuse me, hang on, I'm going to back up. Make a note. Start this over. In my understanding, an open is any tournament that's not a regional classic. So each region has their classic, which is their sort of qualification tournament, their big major event in the region. And then any other thing, like what we think of now as like a tournament, is going to be an open, right? And as I understand it, you can go play in any open you want to, right? Whether it's in your region or not. But those regionals then are limited to teams in the region.
Yeah. So let me add something. So it was also my understanding that you need to have at least five teams at these open tournaments, and that you can only play in your, I don't know what we call it now, but in your own division. You play Ascent versus Ascent, Apex play versus Apex. So that's the part that I'm kind of confused on as well.
Yeah, I'm not fully sure I understand. And another thing that I would jump in here and add is like, I don't necessarily love, actually, I fully hate the point system, like that you can go to an open and earn points. I don't think that's fair. I think like, and George's sort of now famous response in some of these town halls was like, well, some things aren't fair and some things aren't going to be perfect. But this is our opportunity to fix things. And I want to hear from George why those points are important, because I know we want to make the regular season more important. Like, I don't necessarily know that I care that much about that personally. Our sport just kind of works the way it works. But if they want to find a way for that regular season to matter, the idea is points. But my issue with that is like, I mean, Josh, how many tournaments did you go to this year? Just ballpark. How many tournaments did Chico go to? Nikki, I'm going to ask you the same.
I want to say about 6 tournaments.
Okay. Nikki?
4.
Okay. So if those numbers are spot on, and they're probably not, but like let's just say Josh went to 6 tournaments, Nikki to 4. There are teams in the Northeast. There are teams in parts of the West that go to 2 or 3 tournaments a year. Right? So what I'm saying is, why put points on participation? And I understand like teams that do better will score more points, but you're still banking points just for showing up. And I don't think that's fair to the teams that have a hard time showing up. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Makes sense. Never didn't really think of it that way before.
I just think it's something we need to address. Like I don't there are teams in this sport that make their whatever requirement is 6 or 8 now. I don't even know.
Yeah. 8.
And then that's it. They're done. And then they're saving money for nationals and fundraising for nationals. And that's the best they can.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some teams that struggle to get close to 8, and then when they do 8, they just stop. I know my team. I think we played about a little over 20 games this year. So I don't know how many games you played, Nikki.
I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a good number. But there's some teams that don't play that many. They play like
6.
Yeah. You only play in like 2 tournaments. So, but what you were saying, Bill.
And the seems to be based off of like whether you won or tied games, not whether you like showed up to the game.
Right.
I would be in favor of like win percentage or scoring differential. Like those are very commonly used statistics in soccer and other sports, but soccer to name like goal differential is something that many different levels and leagues in soccer use. And that goal differential doesn't like these are stats that are not determined by how many games you play, right? It's not who got the most wins. It's not who earned the most points. It's differential or it's percentage of matches. That seems fairer to me, unless we're going to start, because the difference between us and most sports leagues in the world is we don't play an even number of games, and you're not going to change that today. So that's one that I really struggle with. The other one I really struggle with, Josh, you and I have talked about this a lot, and it affects Nikki too, is the idea that you're going to have the Apex and Ascent team, an Apex and an Ascent team now have the ability to form a club, right? And we see this in teams like Atlanta Sting has like their team and an academy. Minnesota United has their team and an academy. Ability 360, right? We have examples of this now. But the rule as it's written in the current proposal says you can do this if your team is one of the following: A, in the same state as you, or B, within 150 miles of you. There's a lot of teams out there, Nikki's Tidewater Piranhas included, that don't have another team in the state or don't have another team within 150 miles.
Right.
I asked George the question, and I'm going to ask him again tonight. Why do we have to be within that geographical range when we see it in minor league baseball? We saw it back when MLS and USL used to have feeder teams, like USL teams used to feed MLS teams.
Right.
Who cares if teams are within the same state or within 150 miles?
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious to see what George has to say about that. Another thing that was kind of unclear to a lot of people, including ourselves, is that we got these super regional classics and we still have nationals. People were worried, and just justifiably worried that now there's super regional classic and nationals, but that means more events, and more events means more cost. But I would also argue that there's some teams that really don't play that many tournaments in a season to begin with, and so to me it just seemed kind of like I think I can already organically flow with teams that are like that. Like, we play, in the West Coast, we play a lot of games, but the teams in the East, like Nikki's team, they only play like once in a blue moon. So going to these events for her, it's like a super regional classic for her already. I mean, would you agree with that, Nikki?
I mean, I go to more games than once in a blue moon, but
Yeah.
I agree with some of the distance that we go to tournaments is probably already what would be considered like a regional or whatever, because our closest tournament besides our local one is 9 hours, and then
Yeah.
our other ones are like 10 or 11 hours. So
Yeah. But that's
But
a
I
lot.
will say this, and like I'm Tidewater has figured out a way to do this kind of on an island, right?
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
Tidewater is a very well-established team that we all know and love,
Mhm.
that has found a way to make it work when their closest competitor is 8 or 9 hours away,
Yeah.
right? There are lots of teams, and I would highlight teams kind of in the Northeast and also some teams like in the West, not necessarily SoCal, but like in
Mhm.
other parts of the West
Yeah.
that may be trying to or making a season work by playing a handful of regional games and not like I could even use like I think probably like Minnesota Northern Lights could be in this category, right? Because
Mhm.
I don't see them outside of the state of Minnesota very often, right?
Okay.
And I'm not trying to pick on anybody, but like I'll speak for my team, which like we're not a rec team because we don't want to play. We're a rec team because we can't really afford to do more than that. I
Right.
think if you're one of these teams in the Northeast, what if Nationals is in Vegas and your regional is in Florida, right? Like
Yeah.
that's realistically possible. And so if you're a team that fundraises all year just to be able to go to Nationals,
Mhm.
you now got to do that twice. And the argument the answer that I've heard George give in response is like, well, like you don't have to go to Nationals. But that sort of steps on the culture we've already created in this sport, in my opinion,
Yeah.
because we're all geared to play for Nationals,
Right.
right? For better or for worse, that's what we're all trying to do. So
Yeah.
maybe 5 years from now, that makes sense, but it's hard to swallow now when
Yeah.
everybody's trying to get to that national tournament. Like, I don't even see to sort of transition to one of these other ones, you guys.
Yeah.
Like, I one of the things that I don't love is that we're talking about having more teams in the league, right? That's one of the
Right.
reasons we're going to do this.
Right.
We're actually creating less opportunities for those teams to succeed at the highest level of our sport by
Mhm.
saying 12 Ascent, 12 Apex go to Nationals. That's it.
Right.
When the current system was created to give every team a chance to play for a cup.
Yeah. I agree. And then again, it also kind of goes back to the Alive. It goes back to the whole
Acts like
so
he's never been on camera before.
right,
hey,
like who's that?
somebody gotta be the funny man on this show. It's a very heavy topic, okay? So, anyways,
I just
but
fish out of water.
it goes back to the what Bill was just saying about, everybody strives to go to national. Everybody strives to go to national to compete at the highest level that our sport has to offer. But everybody strives to go to national to also socialize. And so you kind of take that away. But again, we have said this in the past episode. In order to make a change in a sport, there needs to be some sort of, sacrificial lamb to this thing. So, take it or leave it.
Interesting choice of words.
I don't know. It just came in my head, so I think I use it.
I think this is real because we talked about like we sort of glossed over this like last week in our episode when we were talking about this, but like you just like cannot replicate the social impact that like Nationals has, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
we've built power soccer culture in this country around that event. And
Yeah.
so as much as like last week I was trying to, take the middle ground and be like, okay, like we can adjust and like we'll find new ways to
Right.
like, I don't know, because so many of us fell in love with the sport that way.
Yeah.
And it is what we have created culture around earning every year.
Yeah.
And there's no way to replicate it. There isn't. And I think it's a reason not to do it.
This podcast doesn't happen if it weren't for nationals.
100%.
Because Nikki, Bill, and I, we wouldn't really hang out with each other than nationals. So, and you could say the same thing for the PK Corner and other podcasts as well that are out there. The socialization is such a huge aspect to our sport.
Well, I just think of all the bit, like, we all know like who hangs out with who in this sport, right? And it's really not geographic. Like, I pick on Ryan, who was on the podcast last week, because like he doesn't have a lot of friends from other teams, and I'm like, you're missing out, dude. Like I have so many friends from all different parts of the country, right? Like, oh, my phone's ringing, it's probably Ben Anko, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not hanging out with Ben Anko if we didn't have like a national tournament. Chris Faria, one of my best buddies, lives in San Jose. Like, and yes, you will have opportunities to meet people at nationals. You have opportunities to, like go to your regionals and meet people from like closer to home, maybe. But again, like and now I'm going to get on my soapbox a little bit because this is something I'm extremely passionate about. But like, disabled people find community amongst each other, and we don't go to school, we don't go to work and meet people that look like us and live like us. And so we find it here. We find it in soccer. We find it I found it as a kid in wheelchair basketball in Easter Seals camp, right? And that's how I met some of my friends that are still my friends to this day. So it's not for nothing to take that away.
Yeah.
Some people only leave the house to play soccer and don't have a lot of other activities going on. And even getting out of the house and getting ready as a disabled person just to show up for soccer can be a lot of work.
That is so true. That's so on brand with this sport. I know a handful of people that are like that. But yeah.
Well, and we have people on our teams, right? That still haven't made the trek to a nationals because it's tough for them to come to practice. Right. And so like we're creating more barriers in a lot of ways by doing this.
And I appreciate my Northeast and whatever region and Midwest pals that I see at all the regional tournaments, but it's not the same as going to nationals.
Yeah. Agreed. I want to talk about the referee shortage because this is sort of like one of the big pushes to do this. I hit it pretty hard on last week's episode. I thought George's infographic on this was really, really good. Like, I think it was a really good example, a really good visual of like what we're experiencing. Still, and I asked George this, and I'm going to push him a little harder on this, is I still don't know how creating more events fixes the referee shortage. Yes to more training, right? Absolutely, right? Like this regional model where we have 3 regionals and a nationals absolutely allows us to do more training and give referees more opportunities in their region, which we need to do. But I'm still struggling to see how having more events and no more pay is going to bring us more referees.
Right. That was kind of something I thought about as well. But like, how can we also incentivize these referees to do nationals? Right. Exactly. So
old hard cash, baby. Like if you're a soccer referee and you can ref a bunch of high school games in your literal city or county, like if you can go 20 miles and ref 10 soccer games, or maybe not 10, but like 5 soccer matches in a weekend, why are you flying to a regional like 1,000 miles away and a nationals 2,000 miles away to ref for wheelchair kids for 20 minutes, 40 minutes? Why are you doing that? You're not.
It's also expensive for teams to host their own referee training clinics. I don't know if like USPSA plans on paying for the future trainings that they talked about.
Well, I do think just to be fair, I think the regional, if each regional had a referee clinic, that would hopefully take some of the strain off of teams of trying to put on the clinics themselves, right? The ref trainings.
Ideally.
ideally. But yeah, I mean, but also like to Nikki's point though, like if you're Tidewater and your regional is in New Hampshire, like
Yeah.
are you really getting like prospective referees to come train up there? I highly doubt it. Right? Like that seems, like we're in Wisconsin. Like if I have potential refs, they're not going to Texas to train. Like not their first time.
Right.
Maybe they get trained up here and eventually want to go to the regional, but they're not
Right.
going there to learn it for the first time.
Right. Right. I hear ya.
Something I mentioned in this, if you were in the Central Town Hall, you saw me go off a little bit about this. We keep hearing about this Innovate to Grow grant that we got through US Soccer, that USPSA got through US Soccer.
Mhm.
And I've heard George now say in all three town halls that is going to hopefully reduce costs for families in going to these tournaments.
Mhm.
I just want to be clear, and I'll ask George this specifically, but that grant is for USPSA, and it specifically cannot be used to supplement our costs. So their idea, and George committed to this in the Central Town Hall, and I'll hold him to it. Like they're going to do everything they can to reduce the cost of the events in order to reduce the registration cost for us. That Central Town Hall was the first time I got him to say that, or that I heard anybody at USPSA say that. Because I think I struggle to see how, like, this is like, it sounds like they're trying to sell me trickle down economics at the power soccer level, and I'm not hearing it. Like, you got to make the registration cost less. And if you're somehow able to do that by using this grant money to make a cheaper event, fantastic.
Right.
But I didn't like that comment, that it was somehow going to help us, because it explicitly cannot directly benefit athletes.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what you can get more out of George on this topic.
All right. Well, I guess we'll get to it. I guess I'll go chat with George. I hope you all stick around. I hope, we can answer some more of your questions and get it right from the source. Welcome back to 3 in the Box. Bill here with George Ostrom, USPSA Director of Sport. George, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. George, you've been taking a lot of shots the last 7-8 days or so. You guys announced a pretty big proposed change for competition structure for USPSA. My first, and I know that you've done these town halls, you've taken a lot of feedback over email and all of these things. Before we really get into like the meat of this, before we do anything, let me just encourage people who didn't make it to a town hall to go out and watch them. They're out there, right?
Yeah, definitely. We wanted to make sure it was accessible to as many people as could see it, even if they weren't able to make their town halls. There are 2 of them with videos. One of them, we had a little tech snafu, and we only have the audio recording for the first one. But the other 2, the video recordings are out there. So yeah, go ahead and take a look. Just with the different questions, there was a little bit of a different vibe to the different meetings. So if you have the time and you want to check out all of them, go for it.
Where are those, George?
Those are on the USPSA website. There was a link sent out, I believe, through your email as well that should give you the direct link right to that specific page for the restructuring.
Awesome. Okay, very cool. So a few things before we get started. I want to kind of dive into questions because I've got quite a few of them. One thing that we heard in the town halls, everybody had to say was everybody appreciates the hard work. I know I said that to you. Maybe you're sick of hearing it, but no matter what comes of this, no matter what people are saying to you, appreciate you caring this much and going this hard and digging in and really trying to find solutions for us. A lot of the questions I'm going to ask you, you've heard before, George. A lot of these were in the town halls. I've talked to you about some of these things, and I said this to you, but it's not the fun stuff, right? Like tonight, these are the questions that we keep hearing that people have concerns about. So that's kind of, we talked about the overall plan. Now we're going to talk about the things that may or may not need to be tweaked a little bit. So before I get into that, though, I have this question. Somebody asked this of me, and I thought it was an interesting way to phrase it. If I was talking to, if you, George, were talking to someone that had been out of the sport for a while, like maybe they took a year or two off, and you were in the elevator with them and you had 60 seconds to give them an elevator pitch on the what and the why of this, what is that elevator pitch?
Oh boy, good question. So essentially, I would propose it as a complete restructuring to help with the sustainability of USPSA and the national tournament. Because right now, we can't continue doing what we're doing, no matter what. We all love having that nationals experience, but there's too many teams, there's too many logistics, and it's just not going to happen. So the next step is, how do we push the sport forward without losing that sense of community, without losing that sense of competition? How can we do this in a way that promotes the sport instead of regresses? So the way that we, based on the number of teams we have and the level of competition that we currently have, we came up with a new structure to have essentially two different leagues, a more higher competitive league that operates much like our current system as far as, kind of that winner takes all, right? If you're at the top of your pool, you get seated well, you go forward. And then there's a lower division that is more flexible with the structure, so that it really focuses more on that level of, at least in the second round, being really more competitive within that group of teams. So that was one of our big pushes. It also switches from more of everybody goes to nationals to more of a nationals as a something that's earned through a regional tournament that everybody's invited to.
Gotcha. That was a good elevator pitch. Okay.
Good.
I'm gonna skip ahead on my list here because you mentioned something. You talked about not being able to recreate like sort of that social impact, that major socialization that happens at a national event. But you guys are trying to do that with these regional tournaments. Can you talk about how a little bit?
Yeah. So I want to take a step back though and say that our committee was spot on with where we thought the priorities were based on the, if you were able to attend those meetings, go back and take a look at where it shows the word cloud. And I have all three of them. The two biggest words on every single one was competition and community. Those were the ones that we were focusing and doing all of our efforts on throughout the whole process of designing. Those were the goals that we had in mind, and it was just trying to say, how do we get there, right? Of course, there were more things as well, but those were the two that were really the primary thing. So I wanted to get that out of the way first. But I'm sorry, now I totally forgot your question. But
no, that's great. Just how you guys are trying to, how you tried to recreate some of that social or even kind of ramp it up for these regional classics.
Yeah, because I mean that is a huge element of our sport. It's the networking. It's talking to other people, getting to know people from around the country, and the things that they do both on the court and off the court. Right. The way I see it now, though, it happens organically, but it happens more of an afterthought. We're there to compete. And maybe you have a team area right next to somebody else's team area and you just strike up a conversation and you go from there. Or maybe you're on the sidelines and you're like, oh, well, that was cool and whatever. And yeah, friends of friends, that sort of thing, you make connections, but there was nothing that was really structured. And we wanted to really focus on how can we build that within our region more purposefully rather than just, hey, let's show up and then that'll happen. It's more of a, it's going to happen. However, how can we help facilitate that? How can we make it more of a goal rather than a byproduct? So with the different components about having an all-star match where it mixes the two different leagues, it's not only that doesn't just help for competition, right, but it also helps with community, having intentional opportunities to meet as a group to talk about certain things, whether it's the laws of the game or it's talking about transitioning to college or it's whatever it is. That's a way to build a community and using really intentional structures versus, again, just showing up and hoping to meet someone or talk to someone. I know after nationals, I'm always exhausted from saying great, or, the lead up to it's like, oh, I'll see you at nationals. It's going to be so fun. We'll have to catch up. And you see the person, you give them a big hug, and then maybe you see them once more. Right. And then like, oh yeah. And then you're driving home or flying home or whatever. And you're thinking, oh man, I didn't connect with this person. I didn't connect with this person. I didn't have the time to do this. I didn't have time to do that. And that list just keeps building. So again, how can we be intentional about that?
Sure. One quick terminology question that I got asked a lot this week. regional classics we know are these big tournaments. It's going to be in the West, the East, and the Central. Can you sort of define what open is? Because I think there's confusion around that.
Yeah. So the opens, it's essentially just a tournament. It's an event, right? Like there's different tournaments that happen throughout the year. Some of them are bigger, some of them are smaller. Maybe there's only 3 or 4 teams at some, and maybe there's 12, 11, 15 teams at others. I don't know if we have any that's 15, but at least there's some that are 10 to 12, I know.
Yeah.
And what we wanted to do is promote more of those large scale events by creating this terminology about the open. Some of the complaints about our current system is like we have new teams or coaches saying, hey, when are the matches, like when are the tournaments for next year? Well, it's going to depend on that team, right? So by including things like, hey, you have to post it to the website 90 days in advance, now that gives teams time to be able to say, oh yes, I can travel this event, or no, I can't travel this event. So getting that message out earlier helps teams prepare. That was part of the reason. Another reason is if we are going to make this, we didn't want everything riding on a single event for national qualification, because there are going to be some teams that are really good, and then a couple of the athletes get food poisoning, or someone ends up in the hospital. Like there's always something that happens. So we did want to make sure that there was some sort of another path. The way that we decided to go with that then was we had lots of different ideas that we could have chosen, but we wanted to go based on performance. So the way we decided to do that was through the opens. So opens would essentially just be a bigger tournament, having at least 5 teams from that league that were there. And then that way there would be some more, at that point, we decided we could award the points instead of giving just a blanket points for matches, because then teams can really rack them up. There's the debate between, well, if my team has to travel to opens, that's going to cost more money, right? That was a big pushback. But my other thought is it fair for teams that can work, that can get 3 matches in every weekend against a neighboring team to just rack up points? Is that fair for the teams that can't? So you're going to be forcing teams to travel. Is it fair to just say, the ones that are already isolated have to travel more in order to make up these points? Or is it better to say, hey, there's only going to be a specific number of teams that are able to host a larger event. Let's make those larger events more valuable to give those teams who are geographically isolated a better chance of earning those points, right? They're not going to be able to play matches every weekend. They have to travel, they have to stay in hotels, and those expenses rack up tremendously. So it was a way to kind of balance the playing field while also having these larger events with more teams and more soccer.
So if I wanted to hold a tournament in Wisconsin and the teams that showed up were, the 4 clans from Minnesota and Chicago, is that an open, or is there some sort of like what qualifies an open? Like what do you have to be an open?
Yeah, so the main stipulations that we were proposing here, I know there was at least part of it in the town halls, but the town halls had so much information, and by that point everybody was just gone. So myself included. So, but essentially the things that you would need to do is, again, posting that 90 days in advance or at the start of the season, just to spread awareness. You'd have at least 5 teams from a league, right? So it could be an Apex Open, or it could be a Ascent Open, or it could be both if you have 5 from both leagues. But yes, so if you just had the local teams here, odds are no, you wouldn't have 5 teams from the same league. So you could still do that, and it's encouraged. Have as many matches as you can throughout the season. It's great practice. It's great for the referees. It's great for the whole sport. But that wouldn't be considered an open. Now, if you were able to get that message out in advance and really recruit more teams to travel into Wisconsin for that event, then yes, it could be an open.
Okay. So how did those and I know you talked about this, but I was in all those meetings and in all those town halls, and I still miss stuff because, like you said, there's just a lot happening. How do those points then apply? Like how did those points that you're earning at those opens then, what does that earn you?
So those points at the opens are what would be the kind of the wild card point system. So there are teams that qualify at the regional, right? So and that we can get into at a different time as well.
Sure.
But
right.
Essentially it's definitely 3 from Apex. It's at least 2, if not 3, or potentially even 4. And then there wouldn't be a wild card for Ascent. I'm guessing closer to the 2 or 3 based on our numbers that we're at right now. So then there would be 1 or 2 extra wild cards for Ascent. And those would be strictly through points at those opens. So yeah, there are some teams that are able to travel and can get more points that way. However, they could also travel to several of them and not do very well and still not have enough points to do it. So it's on merit as well, but also yes, money is always a factor and traveling is always a factor. But we were again trying to be intentional about sharing that burden a little bit by having it only at specific events. 5 was a number that seemed pretty reasonable for there to still be adequate competition. The other thing we didn't want, again, we're trying to avoid farming points. So if there's a team that is really good that plays a team that isn't very good over and over again, then we're going to know the same result. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. But when you get 5 teams there, the chances of that happening are a lot less.
When you say farming points, you mean like playing the same team over and over and earning points?
Yeah. Yep.
Just from where I'm sitting, I'm thinking, what about the teams that have money and can travel whenever, wherever? They're going to farm points on teams like mine that can't afford to go to opens in another region.
Yep. And there's always going to be that element of it, which is why there's also the qualification path through the regional. Okay. If that makes sense. So that was kind of the two. I mean, there are, at least with Apex, there are definitely more chances to make it through your regional than there are through wildcard. And with Ascent, it will probably be close to 50-50, if not leaning more heavily towards regional versus wildcard.
Okay. That does help me understand, because that was something I wasn't super clear about, is like, how do the points versus the qualifying work? Okay. I think this is one that I hit you on before, and I think you've been hit on this one a lot, but like, staying in kind of the theme of like more travel equaling more cost for teams. Like, what do you say to those teams that are like, some of we talked earlier in the episode about like some of the teams in the Northeast, there's teams in the West that are kind of on an island that don't have a lot of, I can't imagine if there's not a lot of teams around them, there aren't a lot of opens happening. Right. So my question is less though around the opens and more around the like creating the requirement for these teams to now have potentially 2 big trips in a season when they're used to fundraising for one. Like, are we doing things to try to find ways to supplement or help with those costs?
So I haven't gone through all of the score sheets to see how many teams are actually traveling to events that are outside of their region, right? Or not necessarily like region, but their area. How many events are they going to where they have to get a hotel room, essentially, right? But in my experiences going to different events this year and in previous years, I mean, this year I've been to Arizona, I've been to Boston, to Dallas, Fort Worth, their event. There are so many teams that will go and spend a couple nights in a hotel room to get games in. It happens all over the place. And I'm not saying every team does, right? But I think there are a lot of teams mid-season that do these bigger trips. Just Chicago over the weekend, how many teams did that as well? I know Fort Wayne has big tournaments twice a year where teams are coming in and staying in hotels. Some of them might be able to commute from Indy or from whatever, but if it's a 2-day event, they're going to be staying at least one night in a hotel, right? So I think I would, again, I don't have the numbers. I would argue at least a half of the competitive teams are doing this at least twice, right? Once mid-season, once to get to the cup.
But what about the teams that aren't, I guess, is what I'm trying to get to, is like, you say like most of the teams, and I understand you don't have the numbers. I certainly don't either, but I do know there are teams that don't. I do know that there are teams that just stay in their area. Yeah. And what do we do for those teams?
Well, I think the problem though too is that everybody's perceiving nationals, the new proposed nationals, as being nationals, and it's not, right? It's the regionals that's that highlight of the season. So they're going once. That's
a tough mind shift for people.
It is a very tough mind shift for people, and we knew that coming into it. And I don't think, I mean, I tried to explain that, but I probably didn't message on it well enough, right? It's the event of the season is your regional. Nationals is more of we should probably figure out who the best team is in the country. Let's throw them together. I will say that we had tossed around the idea of just having it for Apex. Ascent would be done. Apex, these are the competitive teams. These are the teams that we want to elevate. From a development angle, I thought that it would probably be best to include both leagues, right? So nationals wasn't supposed to be a big thing. Yes, it's traveling, and it will be. And I think no matter how we restructure, whether that's adding, I mean, if we are going to restrict nationals in some capacity, there's going to be more travel involved for everybody. This would be a way to keep that kind of that pinnacle closer to home. I mean, theoretically, at least you're not going across regions that way. And I get that, again, the distance between New York and Florida is pretty large, right? But the distance between New York and Arizona is even farther. So by keeping it in that region and knowing that next year maybe it'll be even closer, or encouraging teams to want to host that regional event as well, I think we're again intentional parts of the plan.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, maybe you didn't message on it well. I don't. I'm hypothesizing, but I don't know that there is a way to message on that point well. I think we're just so cultured in this sport to put nationals at the top of like everybody's year, and I'm very much guilty of this too. Like we talked earlier in the segment about, like recreating those social parts of nationals and trying to be more intentional about them. But I think even if we take that out and just talk about competition, like when you were talking about only, even when you break it down to Apex and Ascent, George, right? Like I'm in my head going, isn't everybody gonna want to be in Ascent? Like that's the way we're trained in this sport, is like, okay, I'm in Founders now, but I'm trying to move up. And I think that's a really hard shift for people, both in terms of mindset, but also like here, like just like we're cultured that way in this sport.
Yeah, I mean, everybody wants to be at the top, right? And that's why, I mean, in our current system, we are moving up from the founders to the presidents to the champions to the premier, and it's that steady progression, which I think a lot of people really like. They like that. And there's been some. I mean, I brought up this point in a couple of the town halls, and there's been some feedback on it saying, yes, I understand that. It does take a few years to get from that founders level to keep winning. The team that has done it most recently is Auburn, right? They started at the bottom. They just every year they're moving up, and that's awesome. I can't think of another team that's been able to progress that quickly, and that's okay. They have
shout
to
out San Jose Flash.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Flash too. But you do have to progress, right? Like you have to, and that's a thing. However, if we keep our current system, how many teams do we have in a conference? Do we open it up to 16? Like right now we're at 12, and we could expand that way by saying, hey, yeah, now let's go up to 16 teams per conference per cup. But then at that point, think about all those logistics, right? Having 16 teams instead of the 10. And then the other way we could expand is by adding more conferences. But now if we have 6, 7, 8 conferences and you start at the bottom, now it's going to take you 8 years to work your way up that ladder all the way up to the top. And that's a significant problem, right? By breaking it into regions and then having that ascent being broken down, within the competitive structure, it's essentially recreating conferences within the league, right? So within that region. So that was a way to kind of keep that balanced competition without having to jump through all of the hoops of, every year getting promoted or getting relegated. And there's a lot of teams that are just bouncing back and forth between the two, right? So we have a system. We have to keep making manual changes, which is the other thing that we would have to do less of if we have teams opting in for whatever level of competition they're prepared for, right? Then that makes less manual changes for us as far as conferences. This year we had to do a lot of tweaking just to make the schedule work, to make the conferences full, and to not have like 10 and then 10 and then 16 or whatever it was. Like we wanted it to be as even as possible. It makes more sense for the sport, more opportunities for those founders levels team to be able to move up and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's really complicated looking at everything. This was a solution in order to break it down by region and then also by a skill ability within there. And it's a keep that competitive equity or push yourself and get prepared. I mean, prepare to either win or to not win. And that's it. Like it's that higher level of play.
I guess it does give teams the choice, right? Whether or not they're like what level of competition they want to be at. And it removes some, like I'm talking to the guy who had to deal with the conference alignment earlier, right? Like the last time you were on the show, that's what we were talking about. I think one of the questions that I have in my notes that I wasn't sure if we were gonna get to tonight, but we're kind of on the subject is like, one of my questions is like, how could the new structure grow, right? Like how does it allow for growth in terms of teams and players? Because we always talk about grow the sport, grow the sport, grow sport. When I hear you talk about like making conferences like, 12 teams or 16 teams and stuff, I think of like, I know in our current laws of the game or bylaws or whatever it is, that we have names for a fifth conference, a sixth conference, and that like those structures exist for how to grow within, right? How does this new proposed structure allow for growth more than what we already have set up?
I'm gonna have to double check the bylaws about that. I'm not. I didn't remember there was a fifth and sixth one that was already named.
Yeah, they're named. It's like the National and the American or something.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to take.
I don't know why I remember that, but I remember seeing that.
Cool. Yeah, I'll have to. I mean, it's a pretty big
Yeah.
document. we keep combing through it and finding things. We're like, wait a second, but yeah, no, there's yeah. I'll double check. So yes, there's. I know that the bylaws also don't specify the number of teams per conference, which is a thing that lives in the competition SOP, right? That's where all of that's where all that happens. I know the bylaws also talk about how the board can kind of choose how qualifications in the postseason are run. So that's things that we could just change. I don't want to just make an executive decision about that sort of thing. And I don't think the rest of the board does either. We want to make sure that we have input, but we also know that change has to happen and change is hard. So in order to find a solution that checks all the boxes, I think through the town halls, there's some people that maybe they hadn't put a ton of thought into it in advance. And then during the event had, thoughts like, oh, well, how about this? Or how about that? And it was fun to see them kind of have to go through the same process we did for months, right? To try to get to that point of saying, okay, I see why you're going this route now, right? Like and not everybody agrees with that, and that's fine. But I think there are a lot of proposals out there about, like we were just talking about a point system earlier, and I was talking about, I don't want teams to be able to farm. That was a big one that we came up with. It's like, well, how about just, they play someone in their conference, they earn points for a win, or they lose points for a loss, and we go from there. And like, well, these are the problems we run into. And we considered this, and we'd even thought of ways to say, hey, you can only play the same team 3 times for it to count. But then I mean, there's so many logistical issues to work out there, right? There's so many who's counting that, which matches count. Is it the first 3? Is it the last 3? Does each team get to decide which 3 of them count? What does that do with player stats? It's a very deep rabbit hole, and there are a lot of details involved, and we could go down that path. But again, it's just coming up with those plans that are, I don't know, that meet the needs and to continue to grow. So to your question though, how does this plan grow?
Yeah.
We can keep it pretty similar and then expand by region. So I would love for it to not be from the north to the south, right? For each region. It would be great if we had a northeast and a southeast. And then maybe that central, Texas teams, Alabama. I mean, they're at least a little bit closer than they are up to Ohio and Minnesota. So I think there are ways that we could expand that way to just kind of restructure our regions. That would add more. We could even add more regional directors at that point, which I think are going to be a really pivotal role for our organization to kind of hold everybody in the region together. I really want to. I mean, again, regardless of how we restructure, nationals can't happen the way it's going to happen. We're going to have regionals, some sort of a regional component, whether or not that's the qualifier for nationals. Like there's lots of things in the air right now. However, I think having regional connection is super important, and our regional directors are awesome. I would love to have more of them and be able to focus on a smaller geographic area. So yes, the more teams that we get, we could expand that way. We could still limit the number of teams that go to nationals. So if we have 4, then maybe each region only sends 3, right? So like there's ways that we can work within this structure and expand the structure to grow with the sport.
That makes sense. Okay. We briefly mentioned at the top, but we haven't really gotten into referees. And I think one of the things that you hit me with weeks ago, one of the first conversations you and I ever had about this was, Bill, these are the numbers for the referee. This is the numbers we're dealing with. And you showed that graphic in all the town halls, which I stole and used on the podcast last week. I think that the regional classics do a great job of giving referees opportunities to train, but I am still really concerned about how we get more referees into the sport.
Yeah,
and how the new structure encourages that.
Definitely. So no, the new structure isn't a plan to fix the referee crisis that we have. That's
Right.
not. I think we designed elements, right, like having the initial certification, like having even kind of that level 2, right? We embedded those things in order to help. However, it's not the drastic reformation that we need, if that makes sense. So there's more, and that's a really deep conversation that we can have. But as far as it relates to the regional structure, yes, it's just having those the initial clinics, the certification clinics, and then having access to those higher level referees there for that feedback and support, and their ability to practice what they learned instantly, right? Now, there's also some concern about that we saw in the feedback about, hey, sorry, I keep like looking over to where my feedback is, but there's some concern about, hey, can we have those new referees working in these high leverage games? And the answer would be no. I mean, we would have them working pool play games for Ascent or whatever, right? Like we can pencil them in, and in those situations where it makes sense, but also have this the trained referees to have someone on the sideline that knows what they're doing, right? Like we don't have to just throw them out to the wolves and say, I'm sorry, teams, like you just lost, your game because of an error that a referee made or anything. We don't want that for the teams or for the referees, because they'll never come back. Like I've seen referees, one in particular that the coaches, but 2 coaches got super heated. He was a brand new referee. He didn't know the weird little stipulation within the laws of the game, and he just shut down, and I can never get him back. So like, I don't want referees to experience that either, right? So yes, but if we have the support and we have the ability to go between region to region, if we spread those regionals out by 3-4 weeks, if possible, we can get some of those recruits to work some games instantly. We could get them more supervised support a month later. We don't have to have them in the same order every year. We could switch around. Eastern maybe is the first one this year, the last one next year, or whatever it is. So we could really work those referees across the nation, and really start building up that level of training. Because right now what happens, they get the training, they get a little bit of support, the trainer goes home and they're on their own. And there's not enough time until nationals. And at nationals, everybody's so stressed out trying to figure out what to do that we don't have enough support to even, we barely have enough bodies to be out there, let alone extra bodies to be there helping. Right. So yes. And then again, going back to that level 2 sort of training, we've never had any of that. We don't have a pathway for referees. We have referees that have worked a lot of matches and know what they're doing. And we have other referees that, those higher level referees see kind of, have some of those good characteristics and are working with them and giving them reminders. And we do that all the time in the referee room, right? We'll say, hey, I saw you did this, make sure this, whatever it is. We have a whiteboard and we'll draw plays and say, hey, have you ever seen this before? Even at the higher levels, right? Like referees that have been around the game forever, like, oh, I've never seen this before. How would you call this? Right? Having those discussions, watching film, all that stuff happens, but it's those that are already super invested in the game. And we need to draw more into that. So having that level 2 sort of training would be another really beneficial thing. Again, this isn't going to solve the crisis. We need more than this. There's more things we can do. There's conversations about even incentivizing teams to provide referee trainees at the regional. Maybe that's it's a discount on your on the deposit or whatever it is, saying, hey, you have this name on the list, here's $200 off, whatever it is, just to try to boost that. We've had a lot of conversations. We need to get some more direct action, but yes.
Because regardless of whether this passes the AGM or not, regardless of whether we implement all of this, parts of this, none of this, we obviously have and I think the trainings are great, and I think you guys are thinking in the right direction of those. But regardless, we got to start to come up with some recruitment solutions separate. So I know you guys are working on that.
Yeah, and I'm happy to talk more about some of the issues that we're facing right now with that, if you want me to touch on it briefly.
I do. Because I think a lot of us have those concerns.
Okay, so first of all, one of the biggest things, so there's finding people, right? We have to get the interest. Now, there's some referees that like to work different variations of the sport. They might do futsal, they might do outdoor, they might do, just different. They could even be in other DSOs, whether it's amputee soccer or it's, dwarf soccer or whatever it is, that would be interested in helping out. The problem is, oftentimes those that are really invested in those other DSOs are in areas of the country that don't have power soccer programs, and then they might get trained and then they kind of fizzle out. So that's one issue. Another thing, we can find outdoor refs. I don't have a ton of great connections with the outdoor game. However, there's enough referees that are currently doing it that do have connections to different youth soccer organizations, or might know the assigner for a region, or whatever it is for the outdoor game, and they can really pull in a lot of people. When they find out, hey, it's a 6-hour training or whatever it is, then they get a little leery. But some of them go through it, right, and then they work a couple matches, and then the problem is, though, that let's say they get trained in February, and then they have an event in February in their area. Now there's nothing until the following February, when that team puts on the same clinic again, and then they call the person like, well, no, sorry, I can't, or whatever. And now they're 2 years separated from this training. They haven't seen the sport for 2 years. So one of the problems there is just we don't get the referees enough matches. We don't have enough games to consistently get them in, get them involved, work them into the folds. So I'd say that's definitely another concern. Another one is just financial. So if someone wants to, power soccer is already extremely expensive, and you can just think about the barrier to entry with a strike force chair at 10 to 12 grand, just bottom line, right? Like that's in it already crazy, plus all the travel that we have to do just because we are so separated. Renting the gym space, there's so many costs involved with running power soccer. So we don't have a ton of money left over to feed to referees, right? We compensate them for their time. The game fees end up to be about $70 per match if you're paying the rate that you should be paying, at least for your referees. A good handful of them will donate the money back because they like the sport, they love the sport, but that's not something that should be expected, and it's not something that should be taken advantage of either. So we do need to consistently be paying those fees. We need to consistently be covering referee expenses. But regardless, when we only have 1 or 2 events a year in that area, it's not worth it for referees to travel to a different state and spend time away from their family when they could stay closer to home and make twice as much money on a weekend working the outdoor game with something that they're more familiar with better systems in place for assigning, with like the ability to just kind of select games that you want to do, or whatever it is. We don't have the numbers to be able to do that in power soccer. So there's all of those components that are kind of mashed into one. The problem that leads us to, though, is that not all of our referees, but a significant number of our referees are affiliated with a team or an athlete. Now that creates not only the conflict of interest, and like I admit, I was just reffing my wife's team in Chicago, right? It happened. It was what it was. But it's not a comfortable position for a referee. But also, even at the event, if you're there to help an athlete, then you're also supposed to be refereeing. There's so many more components. So while you're refereeing, if that athlete needs to eat lunch or go to the bathroom or do whatever, then the amount of time that person can actually devote to refereeing is decreased substantially. Mm-hmm. And then if they're frantically trying to do something, now they're going to be late to get everybody speed tested, and now the schedule's behind. And now, so there's so many problems with those referees that are associated, and speaking as one, right, with those referees that are already associated with an athlete is a problem. However, it's the benefits are they're already there, right? They might already be at that event. They know the game. They're more familiar with the game, so they're able to make those calls better. Not always, but often. And yeah, so there's good things that happen that way too. However, if everybody that we have is associated with the player, there's problems. And when we try to pull in people from other variations of the sport and we don't have the ability to compensate them and give them enough practice time, then they flee. So it's kind of this never-ending cycle. And I'm sure there are more components. I didn't prepare a list or anything. That's just going from my head. But those are some of the major components that are preventing us from having more referees that can work more matches. You're looking kind of glazed over. Did I talk
Well,
too
no,
much?
I wasn't sure if, I guess I was waiting for like, what do we do? Because you mentioned pay, right? And you mentioned creating more opportunities. I guess I was waiting to hear like, what are the conversations or what are some of the things that you're having conversations about on like how we're going to start to do those things?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how to make sure that there are 6 or 7 events in every city for power soccer. I can't say that we're going to double the amount of game fees. We don't have the finances to be able to do that. That's the problem. So if teams don't have the finances to be able to pay that really competitive or even over what the outdoor game is making, we're going to be in trouble. But also the cost associated. So just thinking about the running sport again, if you've got instead of having teams of 4 to 8, you have teams of, minimum 11, right? Up through 20, I don't know how many, 24.
Yeah.
Those costs can be shared much easier, right? That ends up being a lot less per athlete than what we currently have. I don't have an answer for that. We need to find people that love it, and we have found people that love it, right? We have some referees that aren't associated with the game in any other way other than refereeing, and it's fantastic. They love it, and we love having them, but we need more of them.
I assume that the answer to this question is yes, but like, are we talking to those folks? Like, obviously, we all know, we've got a couple handfuls of great refs. I include you amongst them. Like, but the guys that we see all over the place, like, are we having conversations with them and farming them for ideas?
Yeah. Yep. Actually, I think Nathan and I are meeting with Mike McCoy and Doug Wolf tomorrow to dive into more things like that. Right. There are other conversations to have to train these referees better as well, because those that aren't familiar, some just like to support DSOs, and they don't know anything about the game, and they don't know anything about refereeing. So you put those two together, and it just turns into someone that's super passionate and also needs a lot of work, right?
Yeah.
But so we've talked about things about having, I'll say like referee comms has been a really helpful tool for me to be training referees, where I can sit in the bleachers and just have a conversation with, if they make a call and they're like, wait, did I do that right? But to have those conversations instantly in the moment, right in their ear, versus, hey, remember 12 minutes ago at the beginning of this half when X, Y, and Z happened, and then you did this. You can just give that constant feedback anytime that you need it. So that has been super helpful. I'm definitely going to order another set or 2 of those comms too, just explicitly for training, right? They're fun to have during the match as well, but the training element is real. The other thing is a camera. We've had those, I can't remember what they're called, but they're, those cameras with the super long tripod that comes up and you can see the whole match. But but to be able to review those matches right after you have them, and while everything's fresh in your brain, and to be able to say, oh, wow, I did that, or whatever. Like, what I hate watching myself on camera, because every time I just find things, I'm like, wow, why do I stand like that? Or why am I in this position? But that's how you get better, right? One of the things you'll see on pretty much all, I can't figure out for the life of me, but anytime I go to give an indirect free kick, for some reason my hand just goes like I'm giving a high five to the ceiling or something. But it's just like, those are the things you pick up on camera that you wouldn't necessarily realize in the moment, right? So it's more meaningful to see things. So those sorts of elements, we could really help improve the referees that we have. It still doesn't solve the problem of having referees that are associated with athletes and that are going to stick around the game.
Yeah. I want to speak to the referee comms thing, because I was sitting having a conversation with you in Eau Claire several weeks ago now, and there was a match happening in front of us, and you and I were having a conversation, and all of a sudden you're like, hang on, and you're in the ear of the official that was out there, and I thought that was so cool, and I think that's an incredible training tool. And I get mad because I'm a sports fan and I watch, VAR and stuff, and I get angry about it, but I'm in 100% support of whatever that was and applying that all the way across the game, because to your point, like that as we have new refs and we're trying to even like you weren't even working with a particularly new ref in the game that I was watching, but it was a unique situation.
Yeah,
and it was
yeah,
really valuable to have that available, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it was a referee that has worked some games, but hasn't had the ability to get a lot of feedback about how
Right.
they're reffing, right? So
Right.
yes, in those situations as well. Now, I got a little bit of, I think it was sarcastic, a little pushback about, hey, why are you refereeing from the sidelines, right? Or
Oh,
like from the stands or whatever. But it's like, no, that's not. I would never have a fourth comm if it wasn't a training situation, right? But I think having the three being able to talk to each other as well is also super important. So
yeah. I don't know. I think in the situation, like in the climate of our game right now and needing referees as badly as we do and needing to create those knowledgeable referees, like you said, like that's a person that I've seen at center referee a number of times. And like you said, hasn't had the opportunity to get into some of those situations and get feedback. Like we need to encourage that in this game. And especially from folks like you and like Mike and Doug and those guys that like that guys that know how to do it. Like that is exactly what we should be encouraging, my opinion. I want to get to a few more questions, George. I appreciate you, taking the time to really dig in on some of this stuff. I got a really interesting question from a coach the other day that I didn't hear in any of the I didn't, and I could have missed it. There are so many questions in all of these town halls, right? You know even more than I do. But the question was, as we start to, in a lot of not just this proposal, but as we start to talk about this sport more and it grows, we talk about finding ways to make the regular season matter, right? Or the like pre-nationals part of the season matter. And the question I got from this coach was around like, if we're going to start to apply things like points or any kind of credit to regular season other than number of games played, how do coaches, from your perspective as director of sport, how do coaches uh reconcile the like competitiveness of those games with like the developmental side of like trying to bring up new players? One of the things that this coach proposed to me, as you kind of mulled over, is like if we're having opens and classics, could we start to think about having things like development games where like we have opportunities for games that don't count towards those points? Is that anything you've thought
yeah,
about or heard about?
yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a really good point. Again, the intention, the classic would be that end of the year. It would, or not necessarily the end of the year, but that would be kind of the highlight. That would be the Indy 500. That would be the whatever it is. That's the big one, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, at that one, you might not want to do a bunch of roster changes. It is what it is. When you get to an open, yeah, that's another situation. If your team is traveling to be competitive in a different city, then probably not too many chances. But that doesn't mean every tournament has to be an open and every tournament has to be for points. So with this model, yeah, I would encourage that as much as possible. The other games don't really count. Like they count, but you don't. The wins and losses might help with initial seeding for Apex or for that sort of thing, but it's not. It's not a game changer for competition. It would be an opportunity to push those development those opportunities. So, like you were saying, can I just get the 4 local teams in the Wisconsin, Minnesota area together and maybe bring Chicago in or whatever and have an event? Absolutely, that would be a perfect time to apply that because the win or loss wouldn't be a deal breaker. It would add to your season stats, but it wouldn't be whatever. And if teams want to just scrimmage or whatever, they're always welcome to do that. With the regional model, the way we are proposing it, at least, there wouldn't be a minimum game count to attend the regionals. So teams that would eliminate some of those travel barriers for teams that weren't able to do that throughout the season. And it also would mean that those teams don't have to necessarily get all of the wins. They could throw in whoever they want. They could experiment throughout the season. And then make those smaller, or not the smaller, but the bigger events, the opens or whatever, that could be their full lineup. That could be their most competitive team at that point. Does that kind of answer it?
It does. And that was, I think, the clarification that I was trying to, coax you into saying is like, we do have the opens, which accumulate points. We certainly have the classics, which are important. but those other games that we're all used to playing with maybe the more local teams and things are still available.
That's going to be
for
the
that.
bulk of your season. Like, you're not going to have the bulk of your season being opens, I would hope. I mean, that would be a lot of traveling. But no, I think those weekend games are what counts, right? That's what gets your team honed and ready. Another thing, just going off that, we haven't talked much about the clubs and roster fluidity. So I don't know.
Oh, we're getting there.
Well, but that would flow well into this conversation too. But go ahead. I'll let you.
No, well, I would let's transition there because I've only got, I think, 3 questions left, and we're gonna try to keep this segment under an hour, and we're getting there. I'm gonna let you. Can you just sort of high level from your perspective give us the quick overview of like how the clubs work? Because the thing I'm going to hit you on about the clubs, because I already hit you on it a lot, which is like I have a hard time with the geographical requirements around clubs. But will you just sort of introduce the club concept for people that maybe still don't understand it or didn't dive in quite as deep?
Definitely. The intention of the clubs is to create a system where teams, I mean, it is developmental, right? It's an opportunity for teams that aren't, or teams that are at that lower level, the ascent level, to be able to play up on an apex team, right? So, but the real driving force was that it should be, the original intent was to be with organizations that already have multiple teams. Does that make sense? A lot of times there's issues with, can this athlete move up? Can they not? Can they? And just, you don't want to destroy that team by moving this player up and that sort of thing. So that was kind of the original intent. We expanded it a little bit to make it more accessible to more teams. Is it accessible to everyone? No, there are some teams. I will push back on your episode last week. I was dying in the car listening to it, but you were talking about how Eau Claire is more than 150 miles from Minneapolis, but it's literally only like 90.
No,
so
that's not what we said. No, that wasn't the point we were trying to make. What we were saying, what Ryan and I were getting at, was that if Eau Claire and us, Wisconsin Whitetails, were to become one team, that we would be more than 150 miles from any other team. In other words, like those Minneapolis teams to lacrosse is what we were talking about. That's what we were saying.
Oh, I thought you were saying Minneapolis teams to Eau Claire. I'm like,
no, that would definitely be
with Falls. Like, you
absolutely. No, I understand what you're saying. No, we were just talking about, I feel like there's a lot of, like, we could even just I used the example on last week's podcast of like Tidewater. Tidewater doesn't have a team within 150 miles. That's another one that has the same, issue. But I guess
where's Surge? Are they near them now? I don't know.
They're all over the place. I don't know where they consider. I don't know where the Surge consider home base to be, because they're from all over the place. But I guess my argument against that, I guess, is like, if you say like they're not eligible, or that not everybody qualifies, but I would say like, then let them pair up with a team that's far away and let them figure it out.
No, that's going to totally destroy the whole intent of clubs. So what I really want clubs to be is a way for teams to be able to work together. Okay, it needs to be a developmental opportunity. It's not, hey, I'm going to be up in New York and say, hey, you from Arizona, why don't you send your best athlete up to me, and then we're going to play, and then we're going to kick butt, and then they're going to go back, and then we'll never see you again. That's not what a club should be. A club should be more interactive. There should be that. I mean, it needs to be a mutual decision. That would not incentivize the team from Arizona to want to be in a club with someone from so far away. So if you're more than 150 miles, now you're thinking about how often are your teams going to actually be able to see each other? How often is that athlete going to be able to practice with the SAM player, going to be able to practice with Apex? How often are those Apex teams showing up to the Ascent practice to give feedback and support? And if you're not going to be able to do that, then it's not worth having a club. A club is a way to grow that developmentally. It's not a competitive advantage. I mean, there's that, right? There is a component that it is a competitive advantage to have it, to have an Ascent team or player be able to join the Apex club for a match. But it needs to be more collaborative. It needs to be more of a situation in which both teams are benefiting. And if you remove that, I don't think it's going to be used that way.
See, and I just think both teams could, I mean, you could make it a requirement where this is a relationship that had to last for X amount of seasons, right? Like if Arizona and New York, want to team up, then they got to do it for 3 seasons. And I think that is beneficial. I think it is beneficial for one team. And I agree with the geographical component of like, not anybody should be able to do this. But what about teams that don't have the option to do it? Why couldn't they pair with someone over a period of time. I mean, because you have teams, and let's not mince words here when we talk about this. There are plenty of players that just show up and play tournaments for their teams that don't go to practice. There's complete entire squads that practice together without one player, and then that player shows up at a tournament. I don't understand what the difference would be if, if Tidewater wants to have a relationship with Arizona and they're moving players back and forth. How does that not benefit both of those teams if they don't have someone within 150 miles?
So if Tidewater is that Apex team and the team from this fictional team from Arizona is your Ascent team, what does the Ascent team get out of that?
The connection to go and play for and learn from a club that's doing it at the highest level. So opportunities for players to go play at that level.
So they get their best athlete to go out and play with people that they're unfamiliar with, might sit on the bench for the majority of the time.
Well, I think they would become familiar with them. And I think that over time, those relationships, like we have social relationships with teams. I would even argue as a coach in this game, like there are other coaches not geographically close to me that I share thoughts and information and drills and exchange like ideas with. And there's players with friends or like competitive equals all over the country that share those types of like coaching. I don't know. I think it's a really unique opportunity for those teams to like join. I don't want to say join forces because I don't think it's even a competitive thing. I think it could be a mutually beneficial learning experience for teams to connect like that. We can disagree on it, George. I'm just,
I just don't see it. I mean, I see what you're saying. And I don't want to disadvantage teams that don't have anybody near them, but that's the intent is to build the team. It's not to take one athlete for an event and send them back. And then,
is there a limit on how many times you can call up one singular athlete in the current, like the way it's proposed now?
No, there aren't. So, but we do need to have some, based on the feedback we tried to fill the gaps as best as we could, but the more pins that are poking holes in that plan, the more that we have to fill. Right. So I think there would definitely have to be some sort of a limit. Maybe it's per match, you can only bring up to 2 or, whatever it is. Maybe they have to have at least as many matches on their home team as there's ways we could tweak that. It shouldn't be, the question came up, why can't you just roster your whole Apex team as Ascent so that they can dominate there? And that is always bring them up, right? Yeah. That would be a hole that we would have to fill. So we've filled some gaps as far as having teams play down, but to have your whole competitive roster lower. I think the biggest difference though would be at that regional tournament, they would have to decide which team they're playing for. Does that make sense? So if they do pop up, then that would be,
I would love to keep debating this one with you, and I feel like I could, and it's kind of fun for me. But because we're getting close to what I kind of want us to be for time, I want to talk briefly about classification and how we haven't really talked about that at all tonight. How classification is going to apply to Apex. There was some confusion. I think I can clear one thing up off the top. There are a lot of people that thought for some reason that we were like excluding folks that would be these PF2 pluses. I actually see this as the opposite, whereas we're doing this in a way that FIPFA is not and allowing everybody to play. Can you touch on that a little bit?
You're 100% right. Yeah. So essentially we're taking any athlete that FIPFA would say you are not disabled enough to play the sport and say you're playing this sport as a PF2 plus, right? Yeah. This is a USPSA made up classification in order to keep you in the game. We don't want you to not be a part of this match or a part of this game. I think maybe your follow-up question here is about how many PF1s teams have and that sort of thing, right? Or am I jumping the gun?
Well, you're jumping the gun on a couple of things, but go ahead. Go ahead and touch on that for me. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, the biggest pushback I'm hearing is, what if we don't have enough PF1s, right? And I think the cool thing, I mean, so people didn't like my answer of you can stay in Ascent, right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to bug.
That one wasn't well received, but my thought is Apex, like you were saying earlier, who wouldn't want to be an Apex, right? Isn't that what you were saying? Like who wouldn't want to be part of that?
I think our culture of our sport pushes everybody to want to succeed at the highest level.
Yeah. And I think those really competitive teams would want that as well. And they would find a way to do that. So whether that means, you know, making someone more disabled. No, I'm just kidding. We're not going to go on that route. Hey, we're an hour into this thing. I'm tired.
Late here.
Yeah. No. I would never say that. But if no, I think there are some teams don't have. Okay, I have to look at all the rosters. When we went through all of the premier level teams and tried to figure out, I wonder who would check which boxes, right? We found pretty much every single premier team would be able to put 4 on the floor, right? I'd have to double check. There was some concerns about certain teams that I can go back and double check. It might not. The beauty is it might not be the 4 that typically start, and I think that's the whole intent. So we don't want I'll use Shockwave, right? We don't. I mean, I think Pete's a 2, Riley's a 2, Chad's a 2. How often does Shockwave start with those 3 on the court already?
Almost always until this year.
So and they've been undefeated. And then again, until this year, they've pretty much been undefeated. I think they had 1 tie last year, and it's been 5 years, whatever it's been. It's crazy. But by saying no, you can only have 2 of those players, right? Now that opens up the rest of the bench to give more opportunities for other players to be able to play. It also adds this level of strategy that our sport hasn't had before, and I think it is desperately needing. It needs to. It's adding the pitch clock in MLB. It's doing that sort of thing where it's just like, this is another layer of strategy that our sport needs. We know, and I'm not. If we have the same team winning the championship 5 years in a row or whatever it's been, I mean, it's awesome for that team. And again, I'm married to someone who's on that team, so I should, but it's also not great for the sport. I think just we need to change things up a little bit. We need to have some more equal play. And if classifications can add that, and that's already part of the international sport, and we can push towards more international involvement, more international recognition, that's the route that I think we need to go. So I get not everybody loves it. And again, we don't want to exclude. We also got the question of, why can't I just play with my friends? I'm like, you totally can. Do you have to play at the most elite competitive level to play with your friends? No, nor should you. Like if your whole point of soccer is to hang out with your friends and you happen to be really good, so you're in that higher level, fine, make a way to have your ones out. The team that I'm thinking of in particular does have enough ones. There might not be it might not be for everybody, right? But I think the vast majority of teams could find someone that is, either start recruiting someone new. That's another thing that the sport needs. If we need more clubs, then we need to get the word out. We need to start talking to different, VR centers, or there's CILs, or that sort of thing. Get the letter, get some, get something on a bulletin board. And no, you're not going to get a whole bunch of people, but at least do some groundwork. I don't know what teams are currently doing for recruiting, or if teams are just saying, hey, we have 7, we're good, like whatever. But that's another thing that this club, keeping it within a geographic restriction, could start saying, well, if I want a club, I'm gonna have to build a club, right? I'm not saying that it's easy. I'm not saying that it'll happen overnight. But if we can push athletes to want to do that, then it's only going to be better for the sport.
I will say this, and I've spent a lot of time, as you have, talking to people in the last week or so about this. Recruiting is hard, and I can speak firsthand to that too. Like,
Yep.
We have been trying to build a team in the lacrosse area here for 2.5 years now. It is tough to find players. I think for teams that are currently built, like, we've been using Shockwave as an example. I don't know how much the recruiting they're trying to do versus teams like ours, but we're trying really hard, and we don't necessarily get everywhere. I will back up for a second, though, and I really hate it when you answer a question in a way that changes my mind. Boy, does that irritate me. But a lot of sports, especially disabled sports, have had to grow into classification systems before. And I think that the credit I will give to the way that you've proposed this is that there is a path for both, right? There's a path to play with classification and take on that new challenge. There's also a path to, we got 4, 5, 6 athletes. We don't have enough class ones. there's also a path for us to compete as well. The one question, and I'll change the way I was going to ask this question because of your thoughtful and good answer. Because this has been asked of me, do you have any concern that teams will like sandbag, so to speak, at the ascent level just because they don't want to meet those, they don't want to put their class ones in? So we're just going to dominate ascent. Is that something you've thought about? I know you've been asked it.
Yeah. And that's partly why that, nationals, you could only qualify for the first year that way, and then you wouldn't be eligible the second year. So you would have to either move up or, just stay at the regional level. So it's not a great answer. It is a slight disincentive. I realize it's not a full, fully preventing it. There is a stipulation in there, in that full proposal. Again, it's buried. It's too long. I was hoping to send something out sooner rather than later. Hopefully this week. We might be messaging on this a little bit differently, though. We might be tacting a little bit here, but yes, there is a stipulation in there that pretty much, I can't remember exactly how it's worded, but it pretty much says, hey, if you're trying to rig this system, you're not eligible for anything. Like you're done. Like, is that a tough call? Maybe. Yeah. Is it going to be very subjective? Hopefully not. But there's no place. I think I said it in one of the town halls. Like if you're going to try to cheat the system, the sport isn't for you. And you're not. I mean, you don't reflect well on this organization, and I'm okay with you not being part of the sport. So there's that. But I will say that we also had originally, or maybe not originally, throughout the process, we had formed and then eliminated a third league that would be essentially a competitive league without classifications. The reason we scrapped it is because the more you divide teams, the fewer teams there are in the pool and the less competition there is. Yeah. So that was the balancing point there. But we also wanted to encourage athletes to become classified just to know what they are, right? That helps our national team as well to know where all the athletes are. And I don't know. There's lots of thinking that went into those decisions. However, this is what we thought was best for the organization.
Understood. Yeah. I only have one more question for you, and this is a Bill question. I bugged you about this at the Central Town Hall. I pushed you kind of hard on this one. Talk a little bit about, and I pushed you really hard on the ITG grant piece of this, but talk a little bit about how we're going to start to reduce costs for folks to get to some of these big events.
Yeah, so the ITG is still it's still too new. So we actually didn't get our first installment of it until I believe earlier this month. So we have some meetings lined up to really dive into how this is going to all be allocated, right? Where this money is going.
Can we back up just for a second, George? Will you explain what it is and how we got it?
Sure thing. So the ITG is the Innovate to Grow grant. I am not the expert on this. Nathan is the one that applied for it and received it. However, it's a grant through US Soccer that is meant to just kind of the way I guess with the application process, the intent of this money was to grow the sport, right? Through, development opportunities so it doesn't necessarily have to mean more players. It could mean more players. It could mean better training for our current players. It could mean providing resources like more classifiers or more referees or better trained referees, anything that we're going to do to bring the sport forward. So that's kind of what this money is intended for. Now, there are lots of ways that we could spend that money, right? There are so many things that we could do with it. We still have to have some deeper conversations about how this money is going to be allocated and where it's going to be used. So yes. So you were asking some good questions at the town halls about how can we reduce costs, or you see how this reduces costs for USPSA, but not necessarily for athletes and that sort of thing. And those are valid concerns. Again, I don't want to, until we have those deeper conversations with exactly how we are going to allocate this funding, I don't want to say with definity that yes, all of those expenses are going to be significantly less to attend the regional event than they would be to attend nationals. The concerns are true that now instead of having one venue, we'll have 3 venues or 4, I guess, with nationals. That is more money. Just that's how it works, right? However, partnering with these organizations and using the ITG funding, it will be less of a financial burden to the organization as a whole. So that part we've established, right? As far as for teams, my full intent is to reduce the amount that it would cost to attend those regionals. I'm trying to remember the exact. I should pull up the thing. I forgot to look at that earlier. Do you remember the exact cost for the Conference Cup this year? I know each team has like a $500 deposit, and then there's a per athlete. And
it's $500 per team, and then I want to say it was like $125 an athlete, but is that
I think it's more than that.
I was gonna say, is that low? I might be thinking of an old number.
Yeah, I mean, I think Turnstone. I think the venue alone, I think is about $3,000 a day. So just to kind of ballpark how many, that's split between this year 45 teams. I think we've, as far as the intent to compete, we're at about 45 right now. So that's split a lot of ways. So it's more manageable. But yes, if that's the going rate, and now we have, instead of 1 4-day event, now we have 3 4 days event, 1 2-day event, whatever it is. Those costs add up. However, if we use that Innovate to Grow grant to offset some of those costs for the development aspect, right? We could do a regional in 2 or 3 days. We don't need the 4 days, right? If we just were focusing on competition, we could get that done. The extra days come in with the development opportunities, with the networking opportunities, with the referee training, with the classifications, with all those sorts of things. So that money could be applied in those situations. Now, can we make it less expensive for athletes? Again, that I don't see how we wouldn't, but I don't want to promise that if not knowing the full financial picture. We don't know what's happening even with our own country for the next few weeks, right? So I don't want to dive in there and say I know with certainty that that's going to be it. I would like to get some bid packets out to see what organizations are able to help us with. Some organizations are able to find bigger facilities and get them donated, and then that would be a significant savings, right? That we can, or even prorated or whatever, so we can get some discounts that way. So again, I can't say with certainty. However, the other thing that will help athletes, that as far as the entry fee is trivial in comparison to the amount of travel and expenses, right? So you have the transportation, you have the lodging, you have meals, you have all the things that you have to do to be at an event for 4 days. Those things will continue to be an issue, right? That will be an expense. So we do have a couple members of the board working on some different things with making contacts with hotels about there's certain things with points and with, whatever, that there's ways to collect pools of things. And it's beyond my pay scale. I don't understand any of it. However, it's in the works to try to figure out some sort of relief that way. I think the biggest thing, though, again, it's a long distance from north to south when we're talking about regions, but the fact of it not always being in Fort Wayne, if it's always in Fort Wayne, then the teams in Indiana are set. I mean, Chicago loves it. That's great. And it's cheaper for them because they don't have to fly. But the teams that have to fly in have to fly every year. So to be able to share that travel burden it might be more expensive one year and then less expensive the following, right? Yeah. So by keeping it within that region, that would be the way to reduce some of the cost. It's not going to be drastic, right? It's not going to be a night and day difference. But again, hopefully it encourages more teams to want to host these events and to want to host more events like it in order to move the sport forward.
Sure. All right, George, I've kept you for over an hour. I think I've expended the list of questions I intended to ask you. Anything else you want to share with us before we let you
go? No, I just want to encourage everybody to send in their feedback if they haven't already. The board continues to look at it. We'll probably, we are going to be making some more decisions about this by Thursday. So if you can get in, we're meeting again Thursday. So if you can get your feedback in the next couple days here, then we will really be able to dive into it. This is the most effective time to send it in. So thank you for everybody that has. I'm just pulling up, it looks like 36 different suggestions have been submitted already, which is fantastic. Several of them from the same people. So I'd prefer even more people do it. There's an option to submit it with your name attached or anonymously. So feel free to, whether it's just a feedback or question or whatever, jump on that, make sure that the team knows what you're feeling so that we can best address everybody's concerns.
when do they have till on Thursday, George, send this in? Because I'm a little unsure when we're going to be able to get this episode out. It might
Gotcha.
this might release Thursday morning.
Ah, okay. Well, get it in that day. The team won't meet until Thursday evening, so I think it's at 7:30 p.m. Central Time. So yeah, if you can get it in before the close of the business day or whatever, then we should be able to see her. And not that we won't read it afterwards, but that would be the most helpful time to get it in.
Awesome. All right. Well, George, I thank you for all your work that you put in on this. I know you've heard that a lot, but we do appreciate it. Thank you for coming on 3 in the Box and for being willing to really dive in on some of these questions. I know that you took a barrage of questions 3 nights in a row last week, and I appreciate you coming on and taking them from me.
Yeah, I mean, I want to make sure not everybody has to love the plan, but I want to make sure everybody understands it before they don't love it, right? So if you as long as you understand the plan and you still hate it, fine. That's the way it should be. But I want to make sure that at least everybody knows. So yeah, the more questions you have, the better. I want to make sure to answer them.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, George. For Power Soccer Shop, we're 3 in the Box. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next month.
Like anybody knows me.
This is a Facade podcast.